So welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Women Who Lead. And this week, we are featuring some of the most talented women who are driving forces behind their organization's success. From branding to business development to relationship building, each has unique talents and perspectives they bring to their leadership roles with the ultimate goal of helping execute their organization's vision. Hello, my name is Teresa Palacios Smith, and I am Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Home Services of America and HSF affiliates. And I'm so glad that you're able to join me this morning for Un Cafecito. So we get the opportunity to hear from these talented women. And again, if you're here in Atlanta, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. In the in the West Coast, it's 10 a.m. Perfect time for that coffee break. Rarely are opportunities, and I love this quote that I just thought was so appropriate for both Mary and for Hope and for Renee. So rarely are opportunities presented to you in a perfect way, in a nice little box with a yellow bow on top of it, right? Here, open it. It's perfect. You'll love it, right? Opportunities, the good ones, are messy, confusing, and hard to recognize. They're risky. They challenge you, and sometimes you have to take that leap of faith to start something new, help lead a movement, or create something that's life-changing. I love that. That's a quote by Susan Wojcicki, CEO of YouTube. So grab that cafecito, that coffee, that chai, that tea, and join us, right? And our special guests, the promoters. So let me introduce them. Hope Atwell. Hope is the executive director for the Asian Real Estate Association of America, also known as ARIA. For those of you ARIA fans out there, ARIA is one of the largest real estate associations focused on sustainable homeownership opportunities in the Asian American communities. Her experience spans from the private sector to the nonprofit association management sector for over 2 decades. She joined ARIA in 2012, and the impact that she has had in the organization's growth, their advocacy, and branding has taken the organization to a whole other new level. She actually received her degree, her undergraduate degree, from Olivet Nazarene University in Illinois. I wasn't familiar with Olivet, so great, right? And then also her master's from DePaul University in Chicago. And I remember the first time that I ever met Hope. And I don't know if you remember this, Hope, but Vicky Salvano, it was the first time I met you was when I attended a national event for ARIA, first one I ever attended. And Vicky Salvano was the president, and she introduced me to Hope. And I still remember the warm welcome and the respect that I received from Hope and the organization. Never having met before, Hope treated me like royalty. I was coming in representing NARA, and she took great care to introduce me and invite me to several events that I had forgotten to RSVP to. You know, guys, we do that. And so she graciously just was a phenomenal experience because, again, the one thing you'll hear is that you never forget how people treat you the first time that you meet them. And that certainly was a memorable event, Hope, for me. And I still remember how you made me feel. So very special. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mary Mancera. Mary is Vice President of Business Development and Relationship Management for the LGBTQ+ Real Estate Alliance. She's also a founding member of the organization, which, by the way, so is our organization, so is our company, Home Services America, Real Living Real Estate, and Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. We're proud of that. She has over 16 years of experience in diverse real estate segments, and prior to her current role, she was in charge of business development for NAGREP, which is the National Association of Gay and Lesbian Real Estate Professionals. But I actually met Mary when she was in charge of public relations for the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, NARA. And y'all know my history with NARA. I was first introduced to Mary by our good friend Carmen Mercado and Yanira, who was the president. Carmen was the president of NARP at the time when I attended my first policy conference. Mary was also the person I learned PR from, right? As she taught us in all the chapters on how to work with reporters. And to this day, I use some of the tips she shared with us regarding working with the press and pivoting. It was part of when you said that. I learned all those from Mary. When I was promoted to my current role, Mary was one of the first people that I called to give the news to, and also to get some advice and guidance. She is a treasured friend and is also an honor to have you on the show as well. And again, thank you both. And for those of you who wish to, you saw Renee Wilson with NAREP, she was supposed to join us, but because they're having their policy conference this week, one of their moderators was unable to participate last night, and she had to pivot to handle and serve at last minute fill-in, which is sometimes what we all have to do, right? We have to come in and do those roles that sometimes, we just have to pivot to. So we're going to hear from her at another show. So let's get started with the promoters. So first of all, I'm going to start with you, Mary, and then with you, Hope. Tell me about how you got started in the roles that you're in, and what, influenced you to really get involved in the organizations that you're working with. And I'll start again with you, Mary.
Well, mine is a long, winding road for sure, in the sense that, I quit my job in corporate America in 2003, and it was a toxic work environment, and I needed to do a reset. And after I was doing a little consulting in that, and my partner then, my wife now, Jamila Ayad, was on the national board of NAREP. And she introduced me to Gary Acosta. The organization, I think, was maybe 2 years old. And lo and behold, I did some volunteer work. And next thing I know, I'm working there as sort of part of the team, and worked with NAREP for 10 years, and all of that corporate background and national marketing programs and communications all came in so handy, because that was really kind of a startup environment. And there's a theme here, because other organizations that I've come to have been, in a similar place, with the Alliance being probably the most exaggerated in that it literally was, boom, a startup as of last year, 1 year ago, Father's Day, really was when all of the wheels started moving for that. So I love what you said, Teresa, because you're right. Most opportunities aren't planned. They just show up in your world, and there it is. And you choose to lean into it, usually if you're smart, because sometimes they're messy, and boom, there you are. And things unfold, and it's nothing that you could have designed. And it's also what's great about it.
It really is. And you learn so much. I mean, sometimes it's so scary because you're really getting out there. And for me, a lot of times it's outside of my comfort zone, and I'm sure for you as well. But it certainly helps you develop into the person that you are today, because you learn from every experience, even the ones that you might fail in.
Oh, totally. You get used to living in a state of uncertainty.
Which today is.
I mean, that really is. It's 4-wheel drive, rolling and moving with the punches. And I know Hope knows exactly what I'm speaking to, because it's as that there's an unfoldment process that goes on. It's really highly creative and dynamic, and it's always growth opportunities. So you feel uncomfortable, you get sweaty palms, you're doing something right.
That's a beautiful. Somebody was recently said that if it makes your stomach pit freak out, then you are moving forward, right?
Yes.
How about you? How'd you get? And I see you have a varied background, right? How'd you get in with ARIA? I think it's beautiful. I love the organization, as very, honored to be part of it.
Yeah. So I started my career right after graduation. I started my career in association management. Had no idea what association management was, but I started with an organization that's called the College of American Pathologists, and this was right after graduation. So worked with physicians. And transitioned a few years after that, transitioned into the corporate world, similar to Mary. And the opportunities in the corporate world is very different, right? And when you're young and you're ambitious and you're motivated, there's a lot of opportunities. And I found myself, enjoying the corporate world. And I remember it was with Westfield, those shopping malls. And I thought, okay, it's great. It's a great opportunity to be with this particular organization. And I wanted to go back into association management and really contribute something and give back. Transition back into association management, to an organization called the Appraisal Institute. So working with appraisers, interesting group. And I was then in charge of membership and marketing. Interestingly enough, one of the things that I was responsible for was to work with other multicultural groups to diversify the appraisal profession. And to this day, it's still not very diverse. And so they looked at me as membership and marketing, and probably because I was the non-white within the leadership, and said, "Hey, you're an expert in diversity, right?" And I said, "Okay, sure. Why don't you reach out to organizations that are multicultural, and see if we can, invite them to work with the Appraisal Institute." And that's when I was introduced to ARIA. It was 2004. ARIA was just formed. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the history of ARIA, ARIA was actually first called the National Association of Asian American Real Estate Professionals, right? It was too close to NAREP, but it was not our rep. And Jim, and obviously his love for branding and visual, and also the auditory words and all of that stuff. He said, "All right, this is not going to work, right? We've got to change it." And so ARIA was then formed, and ARIA was replaced. And that's why, I was introduced to ARIA. I've been familiar with NAREB, just because they also have an appraisal sort of like division, and was also introduced to NAREB. And that's how I became familiar with multicultural organizations, and had been introduced to John Wong and Alan Okamoto at that time through Fred Underwood. As we're all familiar and we all love Fred, and he made the connection, and I fell in love with the organization. And I said, never really thought that I would be, kind of like be exposed to an Asian American organization, but I love the vision of Alan and John. And a few years after that, was invited to work with them. And here I am, fast forward almost a decade now, leading ARIA and meeting folks like you, Teresa, and meeting folks like you, Mary, and others. And I absolutely love what ARIA does, similar to NAREB and the Alliance and NAREB and many other organizations, to move the needle of homeownership, right, for our community. So that's how I got introduced to ARIA.
And you've done such a beautiful job. And the one thing that I love too about the organization, ARIA, is such the beauty of the way that you guys really still honor a lot of your past presidents and the chairs. And, I think it's really nice, because there's always a recognition of the history of the organization. And I could not agree with you more. ARIA definitely is a perfect name for the organization. So thank you again. Mary, tell me a little bit about, because you decided, what compelled you and your team to start a brand new association in a historic era of uncertainty? Because you just said it's only a year old. If you think back, that means you started in 2020 in the height of the epidemic.
Yep.
So let's talk about that.
Well, no one knew that we would still be here today, dealing with the impact of the pandemic. So at that moment in time, in June 2020, the Alliance was was really an opportunity that was born out of crises. And so the leadership that is part of the Alliance had, really to step back and say, can we go forward as we were, or is this time to hit a reset button and start over, which, as both of you have acknowledged, not an easy undertaking, and certainly not one that would have been the first on the list, but it was the most obvious thing that needed to be done. And what we did and how we rolled forward was with a steering committee of 60 volunteers, very passionate LGBTQ leaders that had been part of the chapter infrastructure and members, and everyone with this common vision of we need to do things in a more structured way than where we had been. And it unfolded. Now, if any of you have ever been involved in any kind of a volunteer effort, right? Getting 60 people to agree on anything is, can be near impossible.
Crazy.
But there was a thing here that came with this opportunity, which I would call a marriage of synchronicity and serendipity. Serendipity bringing all of these characters, if you will, together at this point in time, and the synchronicity in the way that we worked, meaning it was efficient. We were on the same page about vision and passion and what needed to be done. And so it really was about executing, being very focused. We could have leaned into drama that was certainly going on, and we chose not to. We just stayed very, forward focused on what we needed to do. And so that, unfolded in such a way that doors opened for us. Corporate partners gave us audiences, because there really was a bit of confusion there that lingered in the months after the separation from NAGLREP, and we didn't pay any attention to that, and we just knew we needed to get things done. And so it's been really, I think, again, what I had said about, sort of startup opportunities is that they're dynamic and fast moving and exciting, and it's nothing but uncertainty. You're making up things every day. There's some of the things that we do that are, sort of logical and will seem to be part of the mix, but you're really starting from scratch, and there's a real electricity that comes with that. So it's been, and look where we are. We launched in October with members in a Facebook page, and then began migrating them over into a directory that we have, in an online directory. We have an elected board. We have our own diversity, equity, and inclusion council that's part of that. We have a women's network. Women make up half of the Alliance, which is an astounding thing based on where we came from, where they were maybe 5% of the membership. So there's some really exciting things that we've been able to do in a very short amount of time. And we want to not only run, we want to race past, all of the things that would be normal and logical obstacles to our growth that we're just ready to take on. So it's been a great experience.
And I will tell you, because both of you know this, the respect I have for both of you, really the relationship that we have is through you. It's through the people like Hope, like Mary, that organizations count on and feel the loyalty to. So always keep that in mind, because you've both done such a great job in aligning and developing those friendships that are long-term, right? I consider you both long-term friends, not just people that we know, through the organization. So kudos to both of you for the work that you do. And also just want to mention, for all all that are not familiar with both ARIA and the LGBTQ plus Real Estate Alliance and NARAB and NARA, you do not have to be, belong to that, ethnicity, or you don't have to be LGBTQ plus. You can be an ally. You can be somebody that wants to empower and also help the communities in increasing sustainable home ownership, and just be a friend, right, to the organizations, which is something important people need to know, because a lot of times people would ask me, well, do I need to speak Spanish to be part of NARUP? And the answer is no, you do not. You just want, the allies are the best form of learning and education and helping with growth. So what are some of the two conferences that are coming up? I do want people to know, before we pivot to more personal questions, ARIA's conference and LGBTQ plus. I think yours is first, Mary.
September 22nd through 24th in Las Vegas at the brand new Hilton Resort.
And we want as many of you to attend, and there's a way that you can actually
everyone is welcome.
Yes, and expecting big numbers. So it's going to be exciting. And how about Mary? I'm excited because I'm going to be co-chairing ARIA this year. So tell us about the ARIA conference and the date.
Yeah, ARIA's conference, it's going to be in person. Cross our fingers, right? That's at least what we're planning for, or hybrid. October 7th through the 9th in San Francisco at the St. Francis West End, right in the heart of downtown San Francisco, right there. We are expecting, our members who've been itching, and our partners who've been itching to have a face-to-face and in-person convention. So yes, thank you, Teresa, for graciously accepting the role as co-chair. I think this is going to be exciting, as your friend Tim Herr is going to be installed as president of ARIA and leading ARIA for next year. So yeah, it's going to be a great event, I think.
It's going to be exciting. And Tim, we're excited that you will be the incoming, and Amy, who's done a beautiful job this year as well. So just want to recognize her too. So let's talk about personal things, because this show's about learning about, things about you. So what are some of the challenges that you either have faced personally or professionally in your journey, especially as it pertains to your success? And Miriam, I'll start with you, and then Hope.
Oh, sure. I think that, the thing about LGBTQ is we intersect with all of the other communities. So, I'm Latina. My background, my father was a Mexican immigrant from Mexico City, and I grew up in a rural white area in San Diego County that there was no diversity. And so that was the first thing of sort of even having an awareness of that difference. And it was in my teens that I started to realize that I was LGBTQ, and that mortified me, because there was no evidence of that anywhere in the community, and nor in friends. And it took me until my early 20s to realize that there were actually other gay people out in the world. And that was with my first Pride experience in San Francisco toward the end of the AIDS crisis, that it was, I went, oh, I'd gone to Disneyland, and there were that event at that time drew about 500,000 people. It's grown much bigger since then. But that having an awareness of differences and not fitting in anywhere, what it does, particularly in my generation, within the LGBTQ community, is people hide. They hide and they cover up. And so if you consider that as you're living your life, you're not being your authentic self, you're not showing up with that ease and power that comes from being grounded in your identity, that there's lots of detours. There's lots of detours. And for me, for a time, it was like, got to get married, got to have kids, got this, got a girlfriend over here, not quite sure how that's going to fit in everywhere. I mean, it's messy. And so I have a great admiration and understanding and empathy, for young people today in the LGBTQ community, particularly of color.
Because it is challenging.
It still tends, the discrimination is very high within family. That is often leads to rejection, which was, secretly a fear that I had. It was not a reality, but it was a fear. And fear, as we know, can really be overwhelming. And so that it still exists with as much of the climate of acceptance that's still out there, that has evolved and is out there. It's still a risk in coming out. And particularly, again, in the communities of color. So I have great empathy for that now, and I understand that to be transparent, to be having this conversation with you ladies is such a gift for me personally, based on that journey and my own personal growth, to not let discrimination drive me into hiding.
I love that. Thank you, Mary, for sharing that. Gosh, I don't even know, and it's so true. And especially today, I see it with the transgender community, right? Where people fear, to come out, or fear, there's still that fear. And definitely with communities of color, where they're still behind, right, in the acceptance of somebody who might, want to come out. They're still that scared. They're still scared. Hope, I know with you too, you and I've shared that, right? How about, some of the things that have happened to you, as being somebody that's AAPI?
Yeah, I think one of the frustrations or challenges that I continue to actually have is there's not a whole lot of Asian American and Pacific Islander, probably less of the Pacific Islander representation within, I want to say, leadership within corporate America, right? You take a look at C-level suite, and there's hardly any Asians. I mean, I think the stereotype that we're, talking about stereotypes, right? We're great workers. We have terrific work ethics. And we are we tend to actually be promoted into middle managers, but that's sort of like what you've probably heard it, Teresa and Mary, the bamboo ceiling. That's where we get stuck because I think, again, the stereotypical that we're not very vocal, right? We don't have very strong leadership skills. And that's something that I know Aria's also been advocating for. And that's why when we developed our strat plan 3 years ago, the leadership bucket is one of the big pillars because we want to strengthen leadership, not just within Aria, but within our community, so that they can be groomed into Aria leaders and subsequently leaders within, hopefully corporate America, leaders within the political realm. And so, you grow up with very little, I want to say, role models. It's great to see that that's actually changing. Not a whole lot. I mean, you take a look at the media, and again, there's still very little representation of us. Of Asian Americans, and again, even less with Pacific Islanders, but hopefully that's going to change. I think if you attended our Diversity and Fair Housing Summit a couple of weeks ago, Amy Kong, our president, had talked about just our community, just, being the perpetual foreigner and not actually, having this sense of belonging. And that's, again, a challenge for our community because even, so much so in the media, you see that. And if you don't see a lot of you on television when you're growing up, or even now in movies and all of that stuff, then you don't feel that you really belong to this country or to this culture. And I think that's what we are trying to sort of like not fix, but hopefully overcome as a community. I think the discrimination and the sense of not belonging to this country has just escalated with COVID, right? Unfortunately, the past administration has not helped, right, with calling COVID as the China virus and the Kung flu virus. Now, there is truth that it came from China and all of that stuff, but I think that has just perpetuated the discrimination and the hate crimes that we are now seeing within our community. So I think that's, I know that's a lot, Teresa, but that's, I think the frustration and the challenge is, assuming that you are this foreigner, right? People look at you and sometimes they ask, me, right? It's like, where are you from? And that's a common question that I think a lot of non-whites, particularly when you've got olive skin and dark hair, it's like, where are you from? And I say, I'm from San Diego. And the follow-up question is, no, where are you really from? And it's like, I'm from San Diego. I mean, I'm lying. But what really they're asking for, and that's kind of like the education is, what is your ethnic background, right?
Right.
Sometimes when you tell people that, it's like, okay, you're really from San Diego, but if you're asking for my ethnic background, I'm Filipina, right? My parents are from the Philippines. So again, that assumption that you're not from here, or people just stereotype you're brown skin and you look Asian, therefore you're Chinese, and there's just a lot of stuff. And, sometimes it's great to come across an individual who's receptive when you're trying to inform and educate. But there are many times too that people don't want to listen and are not receptive to sometimes the information that you're trying to tell them. And that's part of the challenge and the frustration. So,
Well, and I totally understand, because we get it too, right? Sometimes in on the side of the protective side, I think people really are interested. Like, oh my God, I love, you're beautiful. Tell me what's your, where are you from? Because I get that. People always confuse me as somebody that's coming from the Middle East. Oh wow, you Persian, or because they see, or Italian. I mean, there's different things. So I sometimes look at it that way. But I think because we're also in that mindset, sometimes you look at maybe, you don't realize I am an American. I was born here in the United States. I was born here. And so it's really important that people understand that and really ask us, those questions. So thanks for sharing that. I hope, because I totally agree, right? And one of the things that you both kind of touched on was hate crimes. So let's talk about that, because we have seen discrimination on some, each of our communities that we're part of. And how have you been able to overcome that as a woman, as a minority, dealing with being LGBTQ plus, right? Mary, you already told us about how it was awkward, right? But have you ever, faced it to the point where you had to really give an example of how someone out there could also overcome it as well? So Mary, I'll start with you.
Well, I have to be honest in that I have not, and Jamila and I, as a couple, we're out, we're transparent about whom we are. We've been together 24 years. So, there's a lot. We make no pretenses of like, oh, those are two sisters living together. We don't do that. And so we don't, and consequently, we are not ourselves very often or at all really a target of discrimination. But what we are aware of is how that discrimination affects the community, and we're careful in circumstances and where we may not feel safe, and we try and exercise judgment. We have had contractors come here to the home and to do, fix a water heater or something like that, and intentionally do bad work once he knew that we were a couple. So that when we had to have it fixed later, and we realized we had spent a couple of $1,000s on something that had been put together wrong, it was clear to us what that was, because we remember that exchange. So it's not always overt. And then how do you um, fight discrimination, because when someone comes at you for the very essence of whom you are, how you look, and who you love, it takes a real courage, really, to respond, but you have to respond with the confidence in that there's nothing wrong with who you are and how you look and the way you live your life. It's just not always easy, as we're seeing in our communities. I mean, AAPI, what is, grabbing headlines is just sort of mind numbing, that is happening, but it is also happening in our transgender community that is the target for hate crimes, and particularly of the people of color within our community, and the 250 plus bills in state legislatures across the country that are targeting that for whom they are. So it's not going to be a battle that stops anytime soon, but it is going to take the collective efforts of all of us remaining steady in how we show up. And also, Teresa, I have to say this with you, and you've heard me say this before. Corporate America leads social change, not government. Corporate America. So the choices that you make there at Berkshire Hathaway, and how you include the environment and how you include us, people of diversity, within the way that you run your business and the decisions that you make and the lines you draw, is really fundamental support to sending a message out there into the world, is like, we're not putting up with this.
Right. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And thank you for sharing that. And certainly, I think the conversations that we have, the openness really helps, because then people know that they have a voice and that they can go to someone and ask for advice, right? I think that's the most important thing, because the more we educate people, the more they realize, hey, I'm just like you. I just happen to love another person, right? And it's not the same way, but it's the same way, right? In God's eyes. How about you, Hope?
Yeah, as Mary had said, the unfortunate kind of I guess that we're seeing right now in the media is just the escalation of hate crimes against Asian Americans, right? And again, this started when COVID started last year, and I know the FBI, the DOJ, has been keeping an eye out, and it's unfortunate that there has to be bills that condemn hate crimes, and it seems like you have to legislate hate. And how can you, and Mary, it's true, right? You can't, it's not the government that's going to fix it. It has to really be corporate America, because they're good. I agree that's going to require change within corporate America to make this social change within these hate crimes and discrimination and all of that stuff. When the hate crimes against the elderly started earlier this year, was like late January, February. It was hard. It was hard for me to watch those segments that were aired on the media, because I could see that as either my father or my uncle, right, my mother or grandfather, and I couldn't watch it and not cry and be impacted by it emotionally, because the attacks were towards the very vulnerable and the elderly, which, for our community, I think this is very true with the Latino community too. You elders are regarded very differently, right? We respect them and we take care of them, and so to see that these hate crimes were towards them was very difficult. In fact, I told my parents, I said, all right, no walking at the park, right? No walking at the park. Just walk around the property, and you're even within the property, you have to be really, really cautious, because you'll never know. And even when they walk now at the harbor or Balboa Park, I'm with them just to make sure that, they're not going to be pushed. And it's still hard, because you don't think that it's like, this is America. This is not America, right? This should be have been happening like 60, 70 years ago, but it is. It's
Today.
happening. It's unfortunate. The women that were murdered in Atlanta, right? Teresa, I mean, the again, that's why we hosted the Diversity and Fair Housing Summit. And I know one of the sessions that you hosted was the Asian American women and the misogyny that happens. And it's just sad altogether because when you take a look at just Asian Americans, right? And then you've got Pacific Islanders, which is a very different experience altogether. It's when you take a look at the history, it's like peeling an onion. The closer you get to the core, the harder the discussion becomes. And you've got to really take a look at the history and the journey of each of the subcultures of Asian Americans to understand why we're here in the United States, right? Why we continue to be here and all of that stuff. And we're proud to be Americans. We're proud to be in this country, but in this time when there's discrimination that's heightened, whether it's within the LGBT, whether it's communities of color, it's just sad altogether because this is not, I think, hopefully it's not reflective of our country that we love.
Well, I don't think it, I think in general, I think people really are, there's a lot of insecurity. And I think that's the number one. So education is really important. And I think you both really touched on some of the reasons. It's just people don't, they are not comfortable with what they don't know. And getting to know people in their heart and in their soul is really what's going to change. Because you said, Hope, this is somebody's mother. Think about your own mother. This is somebody's father. This is somebody's daughter, son, right? Their child. When you think of any kind of hate that you have for somebody else, that is, just think about how would you feel if that were happening to somebody that you personally loved, as you look at, that other side, right? That dark side. As we believe it or not, we're running out of time. Can you believe it? We're almost done. So there's two questions I'm going to ask you, because I think it's really important that each of you have and work with leaders that have different personalities. You have seen in the differences in the organizations that you work, presidents come, right? Different types of individuals. So for your, what is the best, leader that you believe, but like what personality is best type of leader? And for you, Mary, we're even going to talk a little bit further about what skills are essential to drive a successful startup as a leader. So Hope, starting with you, what makes the best type of leader? And then for you, Mary, what are the skill sets needed to successfully start up an organization?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking that. And as you've alluded to, Teresa, right? We're in a unique position. Mary and I are in a unique position in that our president changes every year, right? And so I say that I have a different boss every year. And for some people that could be frustrating. But for at least for me, I find that to be a really great challenge because I find myself growing with them, right? I find myself adjusting to their leadership skills, whether it's from Amy to Tim. But I think there are two things that that is essential for a leader, particularly in association management. Is one is a great degree of flexibility. We in leading associations, you can sometimes be so reactive versus strategic because you're either reacting to data, you're reacting to legislation, you're reacting to market trends and all of that stuff. So because of that, because of just that whole nature of being more reactive rather than strategic, although you want to be more strategic than reactive, you have to be flexible to the ebbs and flows of what is going on. You could have a plan that is in place in October or November when you're installed, But then that could easily change come like December, January, right? I mean, who knew that COVID would change the world? And for Jim Long, right? And his ability to be flexible and Amy is a requirement. Otherwise, you're going to be frustrated because you want to stick to your plan that you're trying to retrofit because that's what you have planned for. So flexibility and agility is I think a must for leaders, especially now. Because Mary, you've said this, there's so much uncertainty. And even when, we're planning for in-person events in the fall, who knows? There could be another surge. Yeah. All of that stuff. So I think flexibility. Number two is humility, right? Humility to recognize that you don't know everything. Because sometimes I think even myself, right? I sometimes you feel that, okay, well, I know everything. I'm going to insist on all of this stuff. But humility, I think, is so required because you don't know everything. You can't handle everything. And when you've got that humility, you're either going to ask for really good advice and you're going to ask for help. And as a leader, you need to ask for help all the time. You can't, it's lonely at the top. We know that. And so being supported and being surrounded by people whom you trust is a must for you to be successful. So those are the two things, humility and flexibility.
Love it. How about you, Mary?
I love everything you just said, Hope. It is so true. And what I would say to just sort of extrapolate on that for a startup environment, because imagine you're starting with a blank canvas, right? It's where do you want to go? Who do you want to be as an organization? And what don't you want to be? What don't you want to do? And clarifying that. And particularly, with a network of volunteers who are all like enthusiastic and all have their own ideas about, and it's allowing sort of that ideation, that whole process of brainstorming to just be thrown out there to really listen and hear that. And then to take the best of that, to really sort of sift that and then use that to grow, because the more that people feel like they're collaborating with you, yes, the more invested they become, the more enthusiastic and passion that you are able to leverage for momentum. So I would add the things that Hope absolutely said. And then, you just need to be good in four-wheel drive, because things are messy, yes, and they're imperfect. And, sometimes it's a little trial and error. I certainly learned that a lot of that at NARA, to be honest with you. And so you try again. But it's just being focused and being able to keep everyone focused and allowing people to bring their gifts and their strong suits, to the equation to contribute. So it's, if I put it in qualities, it would be clarity, focused, and inclusive in terms of.
I love that. And one thing that you find too, as both of you know, is that it also develops a deep loyalty from those who become involved, which they follow even when they're not, they still come to events, they still participate, and they will for the life of what the organization, because of that loyalty that they feel. And not only that, you are part of me. It's like you can't separate me from the organization anymore.
Well, then it migrates into friendships.
Exactly.
Right. Migrates.
I love it. It's so true, right? Because of that whole belonging and feeling.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I love about these organizations, because you do really develop a long-term friendship relationship with the people that are involved when you're involved as well. So, so what is, we're done. So let's do one last thing. Tell me quickly, what is your favorite quote, book, or advice that resonates with you that you want to share with your audience? And Hope, I'll start with you.
Okay. My favorite book all time is actually a children's book, and it's you've probably read this. It's The Little Prince by Antoine Saint-Exupéry. And the quote I love about that book is, "It is only through the heart that one sees clearly. What is invisible, what is essential is invisible to the eyes," right? And sometimes we judge people by the cover, but really what I think you had referenced this is, you have to take a look at people's authenticity and their genuineness, because it's going to show. It's ultimately, you can't fake it, right? And when you lead with authenticity, when you lead with your heart, and as you said, Teresa, people will follow you. They're going to be loyal because they're going to be drawn to your heart, and they're going to be inspired. And so that's my favorite all-time book, and I read it every 2 or 3 months, just to be reminded of just taking a look at the heart, and not taking a look at all of the peripheral stuff from the outside. And that's it.
And that is one of my favorite. When I was a little girl, my dad, born in New York, right, took us to the Little Prince play. Used to play Radio City Music Hall. And that is my memory of that book and the entire, it was beautiful. So thank you so much. That's like brings some tears to my eyes, the memory of that. Mary, how about you?
Favorite quote, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. And that's, I think it's Richard Bach on that. And what I love about that is that if you have the curiosity, if you keep that curiosity, that childhood curiosity with you in the way that you look at life and how you approach things, you see possibilities. Isn't that what kids do? I mean, the sky's the limit. So I love that. My book that has been now for the last couple of years is Michelle Obama's Becoming, because it so speaks to what Hope was just saying, is sort of authenticity and a realness, and also that we as women, we as human beings really are in a constant state of evolution. We are always in the process of becoming whom we are and discovering things about ourselves. And honestly, as we age, embracing our wisdom. Right. And that book is it's a must read. If you haven't read it, it's so easy and relatable to any women.
Well, thank you again. And I agree. I love that book. So thank you both for sharing your insights, your leadership tips, and inspiring all of us today. It was so very special to have you both on the show. And I leave you with this quote because I think it really captures what you talked about today. And it's by Pablo Picasso. Our goals can only be reached through a vehicle of a plan in which we must fervently believe, and upon which we must vigorously act. There is no other route to success. Don't you think that's just perfect? Beautiful. And I think each of you are driving forces behind that vehicle and that plan. So thank you again for sharing your experiences, and for all of you out there for watching and continuing to be loyal to the show. I love it. I appreciate it. And don't forget, join me 2 weeks from today. That's going to be on May 26th, when we're going to feature the presidents, where we're going to introduce some of the top women leaders running our brands and franchises at HSOA as well as at JOTSA. And let me tell you, there's a lot of them. So there's several series to that show. So stay tuned for more. Thank you again, all. Don't forget to join our Facebook page, share our episodes, and like our YouTube channel. And remember to always bring other women up the ladder when you climb to the top. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great week.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.